Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So in this video, I just wanted to, comment and explain the reasons for zina, which is adultery and fornication, alcohol, drugs, and why these are, why Muslims engage in these activities. Just want to explain the reasons why, because I feel like many Muslims don't know why. This is especially for um, Muslim scholars and academics who live in Muslim countries. And when they try to comment about Muslims in the West, there's a lot of bias, and I feel like they miss the reasons why Muslims are engaging in adultery, fornication, alcohol, drugs, and so forth. So, firstly, we have to look at non-Muslims first in the West and why they engage in adultery and fornication. So, they have in the West, for non-Muslims, there is a dating culture. So, dating is you are in a relationship, a sexual relationship, before marriage. So this is very common, and it has been for many, many decades among non-Muslims in the West. They have a dating culture. They have a culture of having boyfriends and girlfriends. They have a culture of breaking up with them and moving on to someone else, another boyfriend or girlfriend. Another reason um, that non-Muslims engage in adultery and fornication, it's because there is a culture of having to lose your virginity in the West. It is expected in the West that you lose your virginity by the age of 16. Anything further than that, then, they start calling you names. They start making fun of you. So there is a culture of having to lose your virginity. When it comes to alcohol and drugs, there is also a culture of that among non-Muslims in the West. There is a drinking culture, there is a doing drug culture in the West. There is also a culture of hosting or attending mixed gender parties where people are drunk with alcohol or high on drugs. So these environments, they're they're perfect for sex crimes being committed. They're perfect for rape and sexual assault. Many women who go to these parties, they will report sexual assault and rape, and the reasons being it's because they themselves are passed out from drugs or alcohol, and men at these parties take advantage of them. There is this environment here, it's also very perfect for false accusations of rape and um, sexual assault. Um, because there are women who falsely accuse men of sexual assault and rape, and 9 times out of 10, the environment is this. It's the mixed gender party where people are drunk and high and passed out. So it's a perfect environment for men to take advantage of women and rape them or sexually assault them, and it's a perfect environment for women to falsely accuse men. Another reason that non-Muslims in the West, the, another reason why they engage in adultery and fornication and drugs and alcohol, they themselves, the non-Muslims in the West, they have no religious law telling them to abstain from all of this. The West is very secularized and liberalized. Even the quote unquote conservative Christians that live in the West, they themselves are engaging in premarital intercourse and drugs and alcohol. There is no religion telling them that this is wrong. That's why they engage in it. So there is no religious law. There's nothing in Christianity or Judaism or the atheist, if you want to call it a religion in the West. They have nothing in their spiritual scriptures telling them to abstain from alcohol, drugs, fornication, and adultery. That's why they do it. Another reason that non-Muslims engage in fornication, adultery, alcohol, and drugs. Another reason why, it's because in the West there is no legal law telling them to abstain from all this. There is no law against it. They can engage in adultery, they can engage in fornication, they can drink alcohol, they can do drugs. There is no law against it. I mean, there are some, arbitrary minor laws, like you have to be 18 to drink alcohol. You have to be, if you're going to commit fornication or adultery, both parties have to be at least 18 and consenting. But other than that, that's it. And all of these reasons that I mentioned, why non-Muslims engage in adultery and fornication and alcohol and drugs, all of this is heavily glorified in social media. It's heavily glorified among their friends. And it's heavily glorified in Hollywood. Hollywood movies, Hollywood shows. All of this is heavily glorified. Alcohol, drugs, having intercourse before marriage, losing your virginity. This is all heavily glorified on TV, on Netflix. To an extent, unfortunately, it's also glorified in kids' shows and teen shows. So all of these reasons why are non-Muslims in the West, why they engage in adultery and fornication and alcohol and drugs and losing their virginity and making fun of people who don't lose their virginity by 15, 16, or 17. So now on to Muslims in the West. So I'm going to link to a study. It was done by a few Muslim academics, and the title of it is risky behaviors among U.S. Muslim college students. So basically behaviors of fornication while they are in university. And I kind of already briefly mentioned it, but the West has a culture of all these mixed gender parties and losing your virginity, and and colleges and universities in the West, they are primary meetup points for people to engage in all of this, to have parties and have boyfriends and girlfriends. So that study basically talked about the unfortunate amount. I think it was like 50 or 60%. I can't remember off the top of my head. So about half of Muslims are engaging in sex before marriage. This is what the study showed among U.S. Muslims who go to university. There is another link, which I'll link in the description. It is a Muslim think tank. I can't remember the name of it. I think it's called the Family Institute or something like that. And they have a very similar study. This one is a bit older. I think it's from 2001. And they have something very similar. They have, graphs and studies showing the unfortunate high amount of Muslims who engage in intercourse before marriage. So at a first glance, obviously this is very shocking, and many Muslim scholars in not in Muslim countries, when they talk about Muslims in the West, as I said, they're pretty biased. They'll probably look at the study and they won't be surprised. It'll just add to their biasness. And the reason I say biasness is it's because the study from that academic article and also the institute, the think tank, there's a few things we have to look, a few things that, a lot of people miss, unfortunately. So here's the thing. I've mentioned this before a few times. So many Muslim countries, and I'll mention them. So Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, Egypt, Lebanon, Palestine included, especially the West Bank, Syria, Iraq, especially under Saddam Hussein's rule, Jordan, Turkey, Azerbaijan, Mali, Senegal, Indonesia, Malaysia, Bosnia, Albania, Kosovo, Kazakhstan, and United Arab Emirates. These Muslim countries have very westernized and secularized cultures. They have very liberalized lifestyles that are practiced among Muslims in these countries. So dating, having boyfriends and girlfriends, alcohol, premarital intercourse, it's very common among Muslims from these countries because it's in their culture already. So when they immigrate from these Muslim countries to the West, they fit right in because their culture is very similar. Nothing changes for them. They continue to live the lifestyle that they did. Only difference is that they speak a different language, English. If they move to the U.S. or Canada, or I don't know, German in Germany, and they speak French in France, the only thing changes is the language that they speak, and that's it. These Muslims, they are the people who are driving up those numbers in the study. They are the ones who are driving up the numbers of intercourse. They are driving up the statistic. These Muslim countries they also have many secular parties that dominate their parliaments, and that's the thing about secular parties. They want to keep religion away from public, and when this happens, naturally, westernization happens, liberalization happens, and coming with that comes a boyfriend and girlfriend culture, a culture of losing your virginity. So again, the Muslims from these countries that I mentioned, where they already have a very secularized lifestyle, and they move to the West, of course they still identify as Muslim, right? They may occasionally fast once in a while. They may occasionally do, a prayer here and there. So they call themselves Muslim, but they are the ones who are engaging in intercourse before marriage, and these are the Muslims who are driving up the number of in the statistics and studies that I mentioned already. Another thing is you can add converts in there as well. So in those studies of Muslims engaging in intercourse, whatnot, that includes converts, right? People who convert from Islam, like, yeah, their sins get wiped away, but they still did commit adultery and fornication, right? So obviously they're reporting that, yeah, they committed adultery or fornication in university. So adding all of this is why the number is so high. And it's not fair to link all Muslims together, because there are Muslims who, such as from South Asia, for example, so that's Bangladesh, Pakistan, India, Muslims from there, who are already very, conservative, and when they move to the West, they are far less likely to engage in fornication and adultery and alcohol and drugs. Far less likely. In the description, I'll also put another study, and the title of it was Sexual Attitudes Among College Students. And what they did was the basis of their study was race and culture. So they looked at the sexual attitudes of black college students, white college students, Asian college students, South Asian college students, and Latin people from Latin America, college students from there. So they that was their study. And in the study, South Asian women had the most conservative attitudes when it came to premarital intercourse. South Asian, so that's now you can obviously remove, so there's a lot of Hindus obviously in South Asia. India is a Hindu majority country, but Hindus are very open to, it's a very liberal religion. They're very open to intercourse before marriage. So you can remove them. So who does that leave? That leaves Muslims, Muslim women from Pakistan, India, Bangladesh. They have the most conservative views on intercourse before marriage, which means they are less likely to engage in intercourse before marriage. They are less likely to approve of behaviors of intercourse before marriage. So we have to dissect, these things here. We have to dissect cultures, and in this case, even gender. Muslim women from South Asia have the most conservative views on intercourse before marriage. So we have to take all of this into account when we read reports and academic studies about Muslims in the West who are engaging in intercourse before marriage. You can't just look at it blankly. You have to take all these considerations. You have to think about them. You have to dissect. Okay, yeah, there are Muslim cultures that are very secular, and there are Muslim cultures that are very conservative. And we see also a study that shows Muslims from South Asia, more specifically Muslim women from South Asia. So that's Pakistani, Indian, and Bangladeshi Muslim women who have no business being in that study of Muslims committing adultery and fornication. When I was growing up, before I live in the current city that I do, I used to live in a very small town. My father was he was an accountant in that small town, so we lived there. And that town had um a pretty large Muslim population, percentage wise, and the overwhelming majority of them were Arab. I think Arabs make the majority of Muslims in the West. They comprise of the majority. and then I think converts were next, and then I think Muslims from South Asia were third in line. I'll have to look at that. I'll link to it. It's that same study about so race and intercourse before marriage. So yeah, there was a large Arab population, so there was a lot of Arabs in our schools, and I didn't work at that time, but they would be in general workplaces as well. And we would get invited to their weddings too, Arab weddings. And that was my first exposure to Muslims being living very sinful lifestyles, very haram lifestyles, and I was just a kid. So Arab weddings, you go to them, everyone is wearing Western clothes, right? Women are wearing the tightest, most revealing clothes ever, and they're belly dancing, and there is alcohol being flown freely. Everyone's drinking there, except us, right? That was my first exposure to Muslims, drinking alcohol and doing whatever they wanted to. It was at these Arab weddings. There's also Arab restaurants that I've gone to. I've gone to so many of them. Almost every single one of them has a bar where you can order alcohol, and many Arab Muslims at these restaurants do it. Now compare this to my own South Asian culture. I have been to Pakistani and Indian Muslim weddings. I have gone to Pakistani restaurants, and a huge stark difference between us and Arab Muslims. There is no alcohol flowing at Pakistani and Indian Muslim weddings. There is no woman wearing a tight, short, revealing dress. And at Pakistani restaurants, you don't see any alcohol ever at all. You never see alcohol at all. There is no bar at Pakistani restaurants in the West. See, that's the point I'm trying to make. You can see there's a stark difference between us. Both us, South Asian people, and Arabs, we were colonized by Europeans, our countries. So in South Asia, we had the British who took over the subcontinent. And then we had the British and French and Italians and Spanish and Portuguese and Dutch who took over Arab countries and other Muslim countries. So you would think that, the effect of colonization would be the same. If we South Asians were colonized by Europeans and Arabs were colonized by Europeans, we should have, there should be the same effect, right? No, that's wrong. Because, as I mentioned, Arab countries are very secularized. Pakistan and Indian Muslims and Bangladesh, it's not secularized. They're not secularized. You have alcohol and adultery and fornication freely flowing in Arab countries, and you don't have it in Pakistan and India and Bangladesh among Muslims. You look at the clothing. Arabs basically wear Western clothes. How often do you see them wear traditional Arab clothes? Compare this to Pakistan and Indian Muslims and Bangladesh. Traditional clothing still is worn. So that tells you that colonization had different effects. This is not a judgmental rant or anything. This is the statistics show it, and it's a fact that most Arab countries are very secularized and liberalized. They do whatever they want to, and when they move to a Western country, their lifestyle doesn't change. And the same goes with all of the countries that I mentioned at the beginning of this video, like Turkey and Bosnia and Albania and Kosovo, Kazakhstan, them included as well. If they move to the West, their lifestyle doesn't change. They already live a secularized lifestyle. Why would they adopt a religious lifestyle in the West? They lived a secular lifestyle in their home countries. They will live a secular lifestyle in Western countries, and they will pass this mentality down to their children, and so forth. They'll continue. So yeah, there are Muslims who should not be in the same category as secularized Muslims. Um, I guess the reason why religion still survived strongly in South Asia, it's because when the British came, they left, religion and culture to the locals. They looted the place like crazy, but they still left religion and culture to the local people. Whereas in other countries, Arab countries, Turkish countries, European Muslim countries, they looted the place and also instilled a very westernized culture. So my point is, secular Muslims, whether they be Arab or Turkish or from Africa or Southeast Asia, they are more likely to engage in alcohol and drugs and fornication and adultery compared to more religious Muslims from South Asia. Secularized Muslims are very open about their sinful lifestyle. They don't hide it. In the Quran it says, don't do zina, but also don't even come anywhere near zina. So don't even come anywhere near adultery and fornication. So we Muslims in the West, we clearly see what leads to adultery and fornication. We have a clear view of what leads to zina. We know exactly what leads to people losing their virginity, and I've mentioned it already. Some Muslim sheikhs and scholars in Muslim countries, they say one of the reasons that adultery and fornication is so high in the West, it's because women don't wear hijab. And that's incredibly stupid. I've already talked about hijab a few times in my videos. So you can check that out. But that's not the reason why. The reasons being, I've already mentioned them at the beginning of the video. There's no law against having intercourse before marriage in the West. There is no religious law either. And there is a culture for you to lose your virginity. So all these things combined, that's what leads to a fornication and adultery. It has nothing to do with women being without hijab. Yes, obviously there are Muslim women, or not Muslim women. Yeah, including Muslim women, but I'm just talking about in general in the West. There are women who wear very tight, short, revealing clothes. This arouses men. That's true. I've mentioned this several times already. But it has nothing to do with the fact that it's because women have their hair uncovered or arms uncovered or face uncovered. That's not the reasons why. The reasons for arousal are it's because women show off their breasts here in the West. They show off the outline of their vaginas in tight, short, revealing clothes. They show off their bottoms. They do, sexual, flirtatious behavior, which, as I've mentioned, can be done by a woman who is completely clothed or by a woman who is completely naked. So that's why. That's what causes arousal in men. It has nothing to do with the fact that women are showing off their hair or faces or arms. That's not the reason why at all. No man gets aroused at a woman's face or hair or arms. Another reason why, in general, why fornication and adultery is so high in the West. It's because that there is there's a lifestyle of having boyfriends and girlfriends, and this doesn't allow you to settle down with one person and get married. I mentioned this before in my video about where the title was, I think, comments on Muslims who have boyfriends and girlfriends. I mentioned all of this. So, yeah, that's my point. I mean, like Muslims in Muslim countries, when they have biases against Muslims in the West, and they give all these reasons why, about why Muslims are engaging in premarital intercourse. I mean, 9 times out of 10, their reasons are completely wrong. All the reasons I mentioned in this video, it's why. It's why that Muslims in the West engage in premarital intercourse. It's something Muslims say that will decrease the chances of fornication, or of decrease the chances of fornication. It's having an early marriage. I agree to that only to a certain extent, because advocates of early marriage, Muslims who say early marriage, prevents fornication, they point to the boyfriend and girlfriend culture in the West. They say, early marriage can get rid of this, but that's not true, because we in the West here, we see teens, we see young people. They're very immature and unprofessional. These people, these teens and young people, they're not fit for marriage. If you force young Muslims into marriage, that is not the solution. Using non-Muslim teens as a example is a terrible, terrible example of why Muslims should have early marriages. Stop using the lifestyles of non-Muslims. Stop using their culture and apply that to Muslims. This is such a stupid thing that I see happen all the time. Salafis do it. Those red pill Muslims do it. The holier than thou women do it. They will find statistics about the West, about their sexual behaviors, and apply it to Muslims that they don't like. That Muslims that don't agree with them. These people are so stupid. Non-Muslims are different from Muslims. How hard is that to understand? Their lifestyle is different from ours. Another reason why, another false reason why Muslims, mainly from Muslim countries, say that Muslims in the West engage in fornication. One reason is that they say is it's because Muslim women are working. For some reason, I don't know why, when people say this in their heads, they have porn going on in their heads. They're thinking of some romance novel. And then they use statistics about non-Muslims. Combine all this is why they say, oh, Muslim women shouldn't work. Muslim women shouldn't work in offices with men because of all of these sick, perverted reasons I've come up in my head. And here are statistics about non-Muslims. They package it up and then they present it and they say, oh, this is why Muslim women shouldn't work. This is what will lead to fornication. Stupid. It's so stupid. Why do we ignore actual zina among Muslims and concentrate only on things that a lot of times will never lead to zina? It's like these people aren't condemning porn, but they're condemning things like Muslim women working and somehow comparing that to porn. These people have porn on their minds. They think life is a soap opera. So yeah, statistics about non-Muslims in the West, you know, they exist because they don't see immoral lifestyles as wrong. They don't see dating as wrong. They don't see clubbing as wrong. They don't see going to bars as wrong. They don't see nightclubs as wrong where people go and pick up sexual partners. Um, Unfortunately, overly strict and controlling parents, Muslim parents, it leads to rebellion among children, and that's why some of them might, engage in zina and fornication. I mentioned this in my Why Many Muslim Parents Have Failed video. I mentioned, about college parties earlier, and I've mentioned a few times in my other videos too. I will never let my brother, sister, or future children, nor should any Muslim, let their brothers or sisters or future children attend these high school and college parties. Nothing good comes from teens and college kids being in an environment where there is alcohol, drugs, and just plain immoral activity. As I mentioned before, these environments, they're ripe for sex crimes to be committed, and they're ripe for false accusations of sex crimes being committed. I mentioned in my other videos, I'm so upset that so many Muslims attend these parties or even host them. All of these Me Too celebrities who accused or um who were accused themselves of rape and sexual assault. The events that they were in, it always included one or more of the following: alcohol, drugs, mixed gender parties, or mixed gender VIP parties, and that's it. This is what causes sex crimes against women. This is what causes false accusations of sex crimes against men. That is it. So all the Salafis come up with their own theories. They're completely wrong. They don't know. We in the West, we see it. We're perfect. We have perfect viewpoints right in front of us of what leads to, fornication, rape, false accusations of rape. I mentioned in earlier that South Asian Muslim women have the most strict views on premarital intercourse. Another thing, I've mentioned this also before in my other videos, Muslim men in the West often openly committing zina, openly showing their non-Muslim girlfriends for the world to see. We need to address the fact that many Muslim men take advantage of Western culture, of dating, and they themselves commit fornication. Sometimes, many Muslim parents, they pave the way for their own children to commit fornication because, they're either, as I mentioned, overly controlling, which causes rebellion among children, or they try to arrange the marriage of their kids with a cousin or a close family relative back into their home country in a small village. This will obviously cause rebellion. Many Muslim children in the West, who are educated in the West, they will never want to go back and marry a close family relative in some small village in their home Muslim country. That will cause rebellion. That will cause them to go and find a boyfriend or girlfriend in the West because they think their life will just be them, being married to their close cousin in some small village. There's actually, I've seen some videos of some Friday sermons from Muslim imams and scholars who talk about this issue, of Muslim parents who are in the West who take their daughters or sons back home to their countries, to some small village where there's hardly any electricity, and force them into marriage with a cousin right there. I've also mentioned before interfaith marriages. I've mentioned in my video of why Muslims should only marry other Muslims. I've mentioned in there that 9 times out of 10, actually, 10 times out of 10, Muslim men in the West who marry a Christian or Jewish woman, their children are nowhere near close to Islam. They're so far away. And obviously, their children are westernized and liberalized, and they live a very westernized lifestyle. And they might call themselves Muslim, I don't know. But they will definitely have no idea of what Islam teaches. And these children are also pushing that number of um, of fornication up in those studies of Muslims in the West who commit fornication. Okay, I think I've talked a little too much here. But that's about it.